Welcome to the Lorehounds, where we're taking you on a broomstick ride with a view of Oz for our wicked one-shot. I'm Elysia.
I'm Marilyn.
And I'm Nichole.
And it's a Never Mind the Lorehounds and Rituals crossover event.
Well done, Elysia.
But we're here, of course, to talk about the new movie musical, Wicked Part 1. And just FYI up front, our spoiler policy is that we will be starting with spoiler-free hot takes. Talk a little bit about the background. And then after that, once we get into spoilers, we can talk, obviously, the movie that we've seen, the first half of the musical and associated book. We can talk anything we want about The Wizard of Oz, Wiz, or previous incarnations of this story, but we will not talk about the second half of the musical or the second half of the book. And there's a special section at the end, which I will timestamp in the notes, where I will stick around and just point out a few things from the film that are kind of nods to the second half of the book. Okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
The story, just a log line real quick. This is the true story of Elphaba Throp, known to most as the Wicked Witch of the West, and her friendship with Glinda, the Good Witch of the North. Marilyn, you haven't seen the stage musical, right? So this was your introduction to this version of the story?
Yes, it absolutely was. I did try the book briefly and couldn't stick the opening part, which is really depressing, but I know you're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
All my students, particularly the ones in the witchcraft class, were really keen on me to read this and to learn it.
I love the book,
they thought it was fantastic, but I just couldn't do it. Wizard of Oz, of course, the film, iconic,
right?
Definitely a part of my zeitgeist, my background. And I only ever read the first Wizard of Oz book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. And there's like 40 of them, but I think only about 14 or so were actually written by L. Frank Baum. Mm-hmm. But there's so many Wizard of Oz movie Easter eggs in this. It was just really a lot of fun. And I'm never going to remember all of them. But the whole opening Munchkin Land scene.
Right.
The Yellow Brick Road, the Flying Monkeys. Oz's character from the get-go, to my mind, is almost identical to the one in the movie, except I think he's nastier and wicked, which is appropriate. And of course, the ruby slippers.
Mm-hmm. Silver, like the book. Yeah.
Yeah. It isn't interesting how they have both. We'll see. So do you want me to talk about Wizard of Oz a little bit? The film itself? Or
yes, I just want to point out one thing real quick. So you said the name L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz. Do you notice that if you say it really fast, it becomes Elphaba?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's where the name comes from.
No kidding. Wow, is that ever a great hot take? Well done, you. So the Wonderful Wizard of Oz book came out in 1900, and the critics weren't all that keen on it because at this point, children's literature was still in something of a moral phase, and they viewed fantasy with suspicion and didn't want the notion of good witches out there, even though clearly the bad witch was very bad in the book, excuse me. He was something of a socialist, and I think that also led to people not really wanting to introduce this to children at large. And as I said, he only wrote, I think it was the 14 of the eventual 40 books. I kind of think of it as the precursor to the Nancy Drew syndication, because it had multiple authors over the course of its lifespan, and really fascinating. I don't know of anybody who's read all of them, but it might be an interesting study sometime. But obviously people came around. I'm sure the 42 film had a lot to do with that. And the Library of Congress has declared this work to be America's greatest and best loved homegrown fairy tale. And they did that in the year 2000. So
you want to hear my hot take?
Go.
You both have to tell me if you agree or not, but I like the Wizard of Oz world more than Alice in Wonderland.
Oof. I'm not sure I agree. I like the Wizard of Oz world quite a bit. I need to learn more about it. I didn't realize that there were so many books. I'm just learning this now.
Right.
So I think I might need a deep dive to be able to back up but I just love the Alice in Wonderland world and the topsy-turviness of it all. But I'm starting to kind of fall in love with this Wizard of Oz universe, and I think I want to explore it more.
Yeah, it's really hard to say because I know Alice in Wonderland was part of my childhood. It was read to me, and then I probably read it myself. I think my challenge with it is, and I'm speaking just the book now, remember there's also the film treatments and so forth. It really does seem to be written for the grown-ups in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to detect that sort of thing pretty early on as a kid.
Maybe that's why I like it. Yeah.
Maybe that's why you like it. I didn't like it in that respect. I certainly like all the imagery and so forth. I might have been a little disappointed that it was all a dream.
Mm.
That's something Tolkien really dislikes, by the way. He says if it's a dream, it's not fantasy.
But then, it does, in the subsequent books, I think I like actually the subsequent books more than the first one. I've read like the first, I don't know how many, like ages ago, but it gets more interesting when, she goes back to the world and you get more into like Ozma and the TikTok characters. And,
Okay, you're speaking of Oz now. I was speaking of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's okay. So, Oz, yes, I think I'm almost positive. I saw the movie before I read the book, but I really liked reading the book. I liked having the contrast, though I was certainly older than I was when I saw Alice in Wonderland. So it's really hard at this stage of the game because there's so many versions of these tales. And one can really influence another in your mind and experience. And it's kind of like oh no, that happened in the book, didn't it? Not in the film, common occurrence. Because Nichole, you know this, but I always told my students as well, the part of your brain that remembers, the amygdala, is much more trained to vision than to text. And it's also right close to the emotional part of the brain.
Yeah.
And so if you are seeing something that's giving you strong emotions, it's just going to imprint a lot more strongly than words on a text. So.
The amygdala's right. Gonna get nerdy for a minute, but
go.
The amygdala is right next to the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is what takes our memories and finds kind of like a filing cabinet in our brain to put it in. So when our amygdala is heightened, when we're really emotional, that hippocampus is working overdrive too. It's like when you're, I tell my students, it's like when your next door neighbor's yelling, you feel upset too. So when the amygdala is yelling, the hippocampus is working hard to put everything in its place ferociously. And sometimes in those moments, it files them in the wrong place or kind of misremembers certain things. But our brains are definitely wired to remember narrative over a fact and over sequence, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Analytical sequence.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Brains.
So on the whole, brains are wow.
The best.
They're also evil goblins. Yeah.
That's another podcast. I think on the whole, I know the Wizard of Oz. Well, no, and that's not true. I encountered the different ages. I'm not going to put one over the other, really. They each have their own
that's fair.
beauty and strengths.
So what sticking spoiler free for now, what's your hot take on the overall film? Your high level thoughts?
Oh, the film is fantastic. I went to Broadway musicals as a kid. We lived in there outside New York City. So that's been part of my zeitgeist. I'm not usually all that keen on movies having people suddenly break into song, unless it's a Disney cartoon, which I don't really do much anymore. Or, it's a musical. It's intended to that way. So films of musicals have always been fine for me. And wow, talk about spectacle. There's one scene in a library that I don't know how much it is, but it's just, wow. I was this is cool.
That one's been heavy in the promos. So yeah, they know
why
that
wouldn't
they did
it
something
be?
Cool.
Why wouldn't it be? Yeah. I like the exploration of the characters. I had some uncertainties, which we'll talk about more. But overall, yeah, I mean, I don't have to recommend it too highly because the critics are already going wild and the box offices are going wild. And clearly everybody's saying, okay, this is the one to see this season.
Yeah. Yeah, and Nichole, I know you must like this film because you convinced Mark to do a Nevermind the Music episode about defying gravity.
I convinced Mark. It didn't take much convincing because he loves a challenge. And if I kind of prompt him, he'll be like,
isn't that fun?
And he'll deep dive. Like he's been listening to every version of Defying Gravity that he can find, like trying to analyze it. He was like concerned about me coming on this podcast today because he thought that I would. I'm going to read you from some text messages. I'm crying about how you're doing this podcast. You betrayed me by doing this podcast. Save your witty banter. Compartmentalize your witty banter. So I need to save all of my Defying Gravity talk for our kind of.
No, I understand that.
But yes, I am. I love musical theater. I'll say I have a background in it. That's overselling myself. I did drama in high school, but I love it.
Yeah, same.
That's a background.
And it's a background, and I love I go to musicals a lot, especially recently more and more. And I love when they turn it into a movie. I just love it so much because it's much more accessible for everybody. And you can do things in cinema that you can't do on the stage. And I think that they did a really, really great job with this specifically. And the fact that they like live sang all the songs when they filmed it is just really amazing. And like you never see that.
It's incredible.
And yeah, it's just like this. And conversely, like obviously you can do stuff in a stage show that you can't do in a film. But I think that it just gives some liberties in a way that's really nice. Despite having a say background in musical theater, I've never seen the true stage production of Wicked. Okay. So I know that you were
just the pink and green slime.
No, so you gave a little bit of a pause when I said like I don't want to stick around for the spoilers, and it's because I've only seen Wicked Junior. So that's like
what's
the kid. That? So they do this thing for kids, like children's theater, that they'll scrub it a little bit and make it shorter and simpler so like kids theater can produce Wicked. Like my daughter's auditioning for Beetlejuice Junior next week. Okay. So like they take it and they like PG it or G rating it. So there might be a lot in Wicked, the full show, that I don't know because I've only seen the junior version.
So they start them early.
I thought the full show was the junior version compared to the books. But so here's my question. Do you think that the movie is child friendly? Like what age would you say is appropriate for a child to go?
Well, we took our 10-year-old to it.
Okay.
And I can't stop being a teacher, so I scaffolded it for her a little bit. Like, especially after we talked about, like, you know, do you see... Well, I explained to her what labeling theory is in like a very kid-friendly way. Like, do you know that like she wasn't, well, we can talk about it later, but that she was labeled a certain way, and you know how bullying matters and things like that. She had questions about the first scene, and we'll talk about that, like what was happening when having a baby and things like that. Right, so there were some gaps there. But I did think, compared to what I know about the books, the film was definitely more kid-friendly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure, than the books. For sure.
Yeah. And it's marketed that way. You know, my daughter's a big Ariana Grande fan, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, she's in this movie. She was fantastic." Yeah.
She was perfect.
She was perfect and like so funny. I couldn't stop laughing at like everything that came out of her mouth. So is it kid friendly? I think so, and I'm glad that they made it kid friendly because I think that it helped just expose kids to this world. It's really fantastic and magical, and they deserve it too.
Has she watched the Wizard of Oz movie before, your daughter?
She has. So we got home from Wicked, and then she went on a deep dive.
Okay.
And she's like, well, let's watch this movie. But because she has like a TikTok brain, the pacing is so slow for her.
Interesting.
We're seeing that, right? That like it just isn't moving quick enough and isn't shiny enough. So I think she needs a little bit of time for that. She wants to read the books. She wants to see The Wiz, which I think is a nice next step.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's probably a little young for the books, but yeah, for the way.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely too young for the books. One interesting thing about that whole child-friendly piece, I vividly remember watching it on a TV set in the 1960s. Probably like, let's see, could only be like 62 or 3 or 4. And of course, the big shtick they have where they go from black and white to color.
Mm-hmm.
They were so proud that this is one of the first early color movies, and they wanted to do that to emphasize the drabness of Kansas versus the brilliance of Oz. And so there's this commentator talking directly to the audience before the film even starts. And he explains that, don't worry, it's not your TV set broken. It's that they did it on purpose. Oh, and by the way, right before we start, there's this really big lion, and it gives a really big growl. But don't be afraid. It's just a little pussycat.
Yeah, when we watched The Wizard of Oz, her and her friend were watching it, and they were like very interested in the idea that it was the first movie that had like real color in it, and they like couldn't get over what it must have been like, and they really were. I mean, I'll say they were looking at it through like with a really great historical perspective. But
well, that's good. Sometimes that helps. That helps.
But those are my words.
Yeah. So obviously, then your daughter must have liked Wicked, and if she wanted to go home and deep dive into it. What did you think?
I loved it. I knew I was going to love it. It would take a lot for me to not like it, just because I love just this whole world. I thought the music was great. I thought the acting was great. Like the way it was filmed was awesome. I loved like thinking of the arc of Wicked compared to what's happening politically now, and making connections now about how we marginalize certain populations and set certain populations as outcasts, and we need to like find a voice to support those folks. And I just kept seeing a lot of connections, and I was really kind of tearing up to think like how perfect this is for people to see right now. And whether or not they make those connections, it's fine. I know what's happening subconsciously.
Sure.
But like just that it's kind of in the ether now, I think is really important. And I'm not sure if that was the motivation, but that really mattered to me in watching it. I thought it was great. I have such a crush on Jonathan Bailey. So to see him like dance, he was great.
Yeah.
To see him like sing and dance and just be handsome, I was like very interested in that. And I thought the casting was awesome. I can't say enough things about it. I loved it. I'll talk about it all day. Literally.
All right.
Good thing you're here.
Yeah, right.
So I came into Wicked first through the books. I was a big Gregory Maguire fan when I was like teens and 20s, and now I'm getting back into his books. I'm like, yeah, these are great. So Wicked was his first big book. It was released in 1995, so I guess that was the first one I read, I'm sure. And I liked his other books that I really like. I recommend, like Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister is a reimagining of Cinderella, but set in Harlem, and as in the Dutch Harlem during the tulip bulb crisis, and he has like Mirror Mirror with the Borgias. So it's Snow White with the Borgias, and he has like Lost, like combines Dickens and Jack the Ripper. So yeah, I was really into his books. And then suddenly one day, I guess it was in 2003, I was walking down the street in New York, and I just saw a billboard for this musical, and I stopped in my tracks. I was like, what? So I had to go back to Philadelphia and finish my last year of college. But then when I moved in 2004, I made sure that I got to see it. And so I saw it after Kristen Chenoweth left, but while Idina Menzel was still in the cast. And yeah, it's such a completely different thing from the book, which I'll talk about more in a second. But it's just a completely different tone. But I also I love it for its own thing, because especially in the back half, which I'll mention some more later, they make a lot of changes that are that are like, oh wait, whiplash, like, and then you realize, oh, how they're pulling the story together in a new way. And I just think when an adaptation does that, it's lovely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And they, brightened it up, and yeah.
One of the things I was teaching in my fairy tale classes was how an adaptation reflects the culture that's doing the adapting, and asking why did they make these changes? What was the intention, and get a lot of interesting discussions around that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is really interesting. I'm wondering how, I'd like to hear more differences from the book because I haven't read the book yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you get into that.
All right, we're gonna get into just before that, just my quick hot takes on the film itself. I also unsurprisingly loved it.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah. I mean, the production design, I can't stop thinking about the costuming, like just the details. I was just my eyes were getting lost in all the details of like how they have the same school uniforms more or less, but they all have different variations of it.
I really noticed that too, and it made me wonder if they were making comments about gender variation.
Well,
that's
certainly,
interesting.
I forgot to note that. I'll make a note for my future discussion.
They gender swapped one of the characters from the musical in the book, Fanny, the one played by Bowen Yang.
Interesting.
But yeah, the voices, the casting, it was just all perfect. I teared up when Glinda teared up in the opening number, and then I was bawling at the end. I really loved, I giggled pretty much every time they did a word pronunciation. Like, they just did it so perfectly.
Is that in the book?
No, not really.
Interesting. So it's a whole new thing with the film. Huh.
Yeah. I can't remember. Is it in the musical? I can't remember. But yeah, I just thought the movie was just perfectly exactly the way it should be. I can't wait for part 2. And I love that they divided it in half. Do either of you have feelings about it ending on to be continued?
I loved that it did. When I first was going to see the film, I was like, 2 hours and 40 minutes is long. I was like, how am I I can't sit still that long, and definitely my 10-year-old can't, but it flew by, and I wanted more, right? But I think that it was great to leave it on it to be continued, and it was really smart marketing. Now we're going to be talking about it for a year and like waiting for the second half, so I think that was smart on their part. But I think there's so much content and so much nuance that we need time to digest a little bit before we see the second half. And I think it's going to give people time to read the book if they want to, so they can be maybe disappointed by the second half. I don't know.
It's just very different. I'm not saying it's disappointing. They just combine things, but they combine things in the first half. We'll talk about it. But
am I correct that they ended it where the Broadway play ended at Act 1?
Yeah, and one of the things they said, I mean, they wanted, because the Broadway play, I rewatched a bootleg recently. I'm sorry, it's not playing locally for me to go.
Excuse me, yes.
But I did that right after rereading the book, and it was like giving me whiplash how fast the story goes. So I really am glad they split it in half and gave it more room to breathe and added some more elements, like, for instance, seeing Elphaba's childhood a little bit, things like that. That's a major section of the book.
Yeah, I really think that it was a reflection of its Broadway origins. That final song, I mean, that's going to be the one that everybody's going to be talking about, including, never mind the music. I don't see how they could have had anything come after that and not have it, be a little flat.
Exactly.
A little stale. Yeah. So they're ending on the peak. So great, perfect, wonderful. And thank goodness it's only 1 year for the next.
Yeah, that's true.
For part 2, right?
Yeah. It's next November already. Yeah.
Think of all the extra revenue for rewatches,
Yeah.
And they must have filmed it, right? Like, they have it all filmed somewhere. They must have.
I really hope they did, because,
otherwise
you can't really count on everybody looking exactly the same a year from now and acting the same and all the rest of it. So
right. Well, plus,
in order with that high, you want to go forward from that and tell the rest of the story. So for them, it would definitely, I think, be motivation.
And the special effects, they must already be about to start those. So
Yeah.
Seriously, it takes almost a year for a
Mhm.
lot of special effects heavy films
Yeah.
just for those. So
Yeah.
they must have filmed them both at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, if you can make monkeys fly, you can take some wrinkles off of Ari's face, right? It's Hollywood magic.
Fair point. Fair point.
So, Nichole, to answer your question about the book, I'm going to make some comparisons as we go through to the book. I couldn't help it, but I just have to say the film is very much based on the stage musical rather than the book. But it does like take the stage musical and expands on it and adds more nods to the book story. So it's very different. I'll highlight a few of those for those who are curious about the book. Yeah, it was Gregory Maguire's first adult novel. He wrote novels for kids only exclusively before that. And as we kind of said, emphasis on adult. It's much more darker. It's much darker. There's I mean, it's people who complain about it most often complain about some sexy scenes, but like, come on, if you read a romance novel, you're fine. And yeah, for the musical, obviously sanitized the story for some family audiences, and of course they just truncated a lot. They chopped out storylines and plot lines and combined characters, and yeah, I'll point out a few of those, but it's just interesting. You were talking about the political side of the movie. That definitely comes straight from the novel, which obviously, as Marilyn, you pointed out, comes from the original Wizard of Oz. So just a sample from the book. This was published 30 years ago, but it feels apt today. This is something that Bach is saying in an alternate future timeline that doesn't exist in the musical. He says, "I am a Munchkinlander," he answered proudly. "Look, Elfie, you've more or less convinced me what the wizard is up to. The confining of animals back onto the farms to give the dissatisfied Munchkinlander farmers the impression he's doing something for them, and also provide forced labor for the sinking of new wells. It's vile." So we see, there's too many parallels with giving the impression of doing something for them.
Yeah.
And then later there's a different conversation with the sentient cow. "And animals in pens have lots of time to develop theories," said the cow. "I've heard more than one clever creature draw a connection between the rise of TikTokism and the erosion of traditional animal labor. If we were made redundant in the workforce, it was only a matter of time before we'd be socially redundant too."
Can someone please tell me if someone in China has read this book and latched onto the word TikTokism? I just, wow.
It's like,
did that ever hit me between the eyes?
Right? It's like almost too on the nose not to think of like string theory and alternate universes and like how, I don't know. It's like, is it a simulation? Is it? Like, is that what's happening?
The answer to that is yes, but
that's a different conversation. Yeah, for sure. Avi.
I haven't seen The Matrix. I will confess now. One of these days, I will sit down and watch it. I promise.
Well, bring a weighted blanket.
It's a sound scientific theory, though. But yeah, in this case, TikTokism, they're referring to like robotics, but I can think of it as AI in the parlance of today. Once people are replaced by AI in the workforce, socially redundant too. So anyway, this is why people love that book. But there is a lot of darkness. Elphaba has a tough life, and there's a lot of unhappy endings for different characters. But yeah, there was talk in 2009 and 2011 of doing a TV adaptation of the book, the original plot, not the musical version. But we haven't heard anything since. So like fingers crossed that this film revives interest, because I'd really like that.
We'll send it to HBO. They won't mind anything about the sex.
Exactly. No, they'll love it. They're like, "Oh, you already wrote those scenes for us. Thank you." But the book is it's the first in a series. So there's The Wicked Years, has 4 novels. Wicked 1995, then it's followed by Son of a Witch, A Lion Among Men, and Out of Oz was in 2011. And then there's a follow-up trilogy called Another Day, and the 3 books in that published between 2021 and 2023. So yeah, it's gone. And now this year, 2025, Gregory Maguire's publishing a new prequel called Elfie, A Wicked Childhood. And basically, and I have to respect this, he's like, this musical thing's blowing up, And I'm really glad that they have that version of the story, but I still want mine to be the definitive version.
Right.
Isn't it interesting? He's almost following on the same pattern as L. Frank Baum. You know, one book became so incredibly popular that he did another one and another one and another. And so
Right.
it goes in cycles.
Yeah, I was sparked to read Wicked, right? But now I see all these other books, and I just don't have that kind of time.
I'm halfway through a reread of the second one, and I know after I finish this book, I have to put them down because I need to pay attention to like Star Wars and Dune books and stuff. But
and Silo. Yes.
Well, I've read. Yeah, I'm done rereading Silo for now. But yeah, I don't want to put them down because I'm so sucked into the world and I care about the characters so much. But anyway, yeah, novel 1995, hugely different from the original novel and film, except for there's nods to both actually. So like Glinda in the Wizard of Oz novel, she's from the South, and there's another Wicked Witch in the North. And then this version, Glinda is from the North, like in the film.
Interesting.
39 film. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a question. Are we into spoilers yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. I'll hold that thought.
Okay, just running through the back. So musical opened on Broadway 2003, won 3 Tonys and a Grammy, has broken box office records around the world. Of course, there's that song. What do you guys think of the other songs in the movie?
I loved the other songs in the movie. And I mentioned before, like, I thought that the casting was really great, and I thought their voices really matched the tone of what I think of like the originals, which is the original Broadway cast. But there were a lot of the songs have picked up a lot of popularity. It's like a funny Wicked joke because of the song Popular.
Yeah. Popular.
On like social media and TikTok and things like that. So it's been fun to kind of see it brought into the lexicon more.
Yeah. Again, I can remember my students singing the songs when the Broadway first came out, because we had a lot of Broadway lovers at Cole. We still do, big theater departments. So it was a big thing. It's interesting. I can remember, sorry, this is age again. I can remember when Broadway shifted from an earlier form of singing and vocalization, you know, Sound of Music, Carousel, Oklahoma, that kind of thing, to the belting it out phase. And I didn't like that change. I didn't like, you know, because they all sounded the same to my ears. I wasn't familiar with, you know, the variations of it. And so it just kind of went along over time. I never thought about that in the film.
Right.
It just wasn't an issue. Now, maybe because the way they were recording, they didn't have to do the belting quite so much. But it was still that same kind of sort of approach, which, you know, it's great. I mean, I love Wagnerian operas, so what's the difference, right? But there is a difference, if anybody doesn't know. So that speaks to me of how well they integrated the singing into the story.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important to me. So often, you know, you're really drawn into the story, and then, we got to sing a song now because it's a musical. Right. All right. Da-da-da-da. These songs were a part of the story, and I think they really did that well.
Yeah.
It was very seamless, how it just kept like progressing the plot in a very seamless way.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Especially with the last song. I was surprised. They stretched it out for like 15 minutes. Like the song started, I was like, wait a minute, there's like 15 minutes left.
I know. I kept trying to sing along and getting like messed up, like singing along to this soundtrack in my car. I'm like, oh, wait, okay, no, she's revamping. Like she has to climb up to the top. But
hey, come on, they got a whole castle to play with. Of course it's going to take 15 minutes.
It was so good. And I loved the song. I'm not sure if it was in the original because, again, a Wicked Junior, but when they had
all the songs this time were in the original. Next time there's 2 new ones. Yeah,
that's cool. I like how they brought in. I don't. Is this a spoiler? When they went to Oz and they had like the recap of the history of Oz and the 2 characters that were singing the recap.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Okay. Yeah.
I love that too. I love that too.
Yeah.
It was like so magical, and I watched. We'll talk about it later, but
yeah.
There was a lot of thought behind that, and I thought that thoughtfulness was really lovely. So
yeah. Yeah.
And the other than Popular, the other one that sticks in my head is the Loathing. Loathing. Anyway,
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I've
let's
really mastered that choreography, by the way.
Yay!
Oh, good.
I also had brief career on the stage, and in my early work years here in Maine, I was one of the cousins and sisters and aunts of the admiral in which is the Gilbert and Sullivan HMS Pinafore, which was all reworked into a Star Trek theme. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Yes, very clever.
Question: Are either of you familiar with the director John M. Chu's previous work? So he's In the Heights, Crazy Rich Asians, Step Up 2 and 3, not 1, and some like Bieber stuff and other stuff.
I loved Crazy Rich Asians.
Okay, yeah, that was fun.
I actually have it on DVD.
I liked In the Heights, but no, I didn't love it. I'm curious to learn more about the Bieber stuff. I do have a case of Bieber fever, and I'm wondering, like, what? I know. I'm trying to get it treated.
A virulent disease.
You have to look it up and talk about it in the give that banter to Mark.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in our notes. So Bieber fever.
Bieber
My notes
fever.
to him. He's
gonna
like, "What
be
does
so
this
excited.
note mean?" Yeah, he's like, "What do these notes mean?" They're just random thoughts that pop in my head. Bieber fever.
I was a little worried because I don't love In the Heights personally. But
never saw it.
Nailed this one. Yeah. The screenplay was by Winnie Holtzman, who did the stage book, and Dana Fox then worked with her to adapt it to screen. Music was like like the Broadway show by Stephen Schwartz, who's also best known for like Godspell, Pippin, bunch of Disney songs. We'll talk through the cast as we go. Of course, Cynthia Erivo and Aria. Why can't I say these names right now? Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are the two stars. Budget is a reported 150 million, which is always underreported, but still, that's pretty modest. And then for a movie of this size, I mean, and then the box office so far, as of this number is as of December 11th. So after it's been open 20 days in the US, but then less than half that in Europe, it's almost 500 million. So it's got a long way to go in the box office. I mean, it's not nearly done its run, but it's already one of the highest grossing musicals ever. Hey, Editor Elysia checking in from the future to update and say that as of December 29th, the worldwide box office total is standing above 635 million. And as of the day before this is released, on December 30th, it has become the highest grossing movie musical of all time, surpassing Mamma Mia. So there we go. And it's gotten 4 Golden Globe noms already, and it's likely to be a big contender at the Oscars. So, Marilyn, let me ask you, as our final non-spoiler question, to whom would you recommend this movie?
Oh, pretty much anybody, but I mean, you got to know your kids. I mean, some kids can handle it, others can't. Are they good enough to say, if you tell them a few things that they might see, that they can say, no, I don't want to do that because it's scary. With that caveat, I mean, there's a lot here for a lot of people. And again, as Library of Congress said, the quintessential American fantasy story. Although we don't see that story, which is kind of interesting. It's how Dorothy appears to be lurking in the background. They do one shot of, the 4 of them looking so.
She should be in part 2 more, yeah. I mean,
okay,
not
I
a
was
spoiler
interested to
based
know
on
that.
the Wizard of Oz.
No. Yeah. So, but this is, the coming of age for a very crucial woman in the story before Dorothy came along. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's not Dorothy's story, that's for sure. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, the equations to Harry Potter and Hogwarts and all that stuff, which I'll talk about more.
Yeah. Oh. And Nichole?
Yeah. I would recommend it to almost anyone, with the caveat of like, think of age appropriateness for certain audiences. But I was surprised. Like, I wanted to see it. I'm a theater kid and my daughter's a theater kid, But I was most surprised that my husband, who's like, I'll call him like he's a typical cisgendered man, macho guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was like, we got to go see Wicked. And
Whoa.
not only that, and he was like, we got to go. I bought us tickets. Like, should we wear outfits? Like, what? And then he was like, after Wicked, he was like, I'm trying to figure out the timeline because it doesn't match up with the timeline of The Wizard of Oz. And he's like, looking up all these videos online of like professors dissecting like where Wicked fits in like the arc of Wizard of Oz. He's like, and you know what? Act 2, and then he like goes into like where that fits in this whole world and universe. And I was like, you are like, it's getting weird how into this you are.
Yeah, I like to see it.
Which I love to see it. So I think that it's, again, I like how this is made. So this is like Wicked's like the ultimate theater nerd show, I think. It's like, and Les Mis said this with me.
Yes.
And I think that it's bringing it to the masses in a way that like makes all the theater kids like feel seen and validated that like, yes, we were right. This is great.
They held space for us. Yeah.
They did. I'm not supposed to talk about that on this podcast. So check out our episode about holding space.
No, I have to think of John, who likes to make fun of the press tour of this movie.
It's so unhinged and awesome. I'm so into it.
I was a theater kid too, so this is how people I went to school with talk. Yeah.
And a lot of my students were theater kids too, so this all is beginning to make a lot of sense.
Like, oh right. You emote.
All right. So we're going to pause there, take a break, and then in the second half we are unleashing the spoilers. So if you don't want to hear spoilers about only this first part, I will warn you before I launch into any spoilers for the second part, then check out now, because part 1 spoilers begin right after these messages. All right, so we're going to be talking through the major set pieces and characters of the movie. But before we do that, we heard from our Lorehounds co-host, Ron. You can find him online at Dungeons and Do-Rags. And this is what he thought. Speaking of, this is not only for women. So speaking of that, this is what Ron thought of the movie.
I've never seen the musical Wicked, but I thought part 1 in the theater was wonderful. Ariana Grande was hilarious with the hair flips and her comical narcissism. And she did it just enough where it wasn't silly, because that kind of thing can get silly if you don't do it right. And I thought she did it just perfectly. Cynthia Erivo was also wonderful. Just the depth of her character and just her eyes, the way she conveyed so much with her eyes, I thought was wonderful. And of course, the singing gives you goose pimples. It reframed how I look at Wizard of Oz, because I don't know if this story is considered canonical or not, but let's assume just for shits and giggles it is. Obviously, it reframes the way you think of the witch, because she starts out as actually a good person, a person who is fighting for the injustice of what's happening in the land of Oz. And there's a clear message about, fascism and the overreach of power structures. And when I see the kind of things happening in our country today, our country being the United States, I can't help but think about some of those things when I watch this movie. But how at the end of the movie she is demonized and called a witch because she wants to stand up. And again, it makes me think about demonizations that happen in our world when people do look different. I make a lot of content about my own personal journey as a now agnostic atheist, but I was a devout Christian for a long time. And there is a lot of demonization that happens in the United States from the evangelical right towards those in the LGBTQ community, for instance, where they are literally called demons. And I couldn't help but think of that at the end of this movie when Professor Marvel, I'm not quite sure how I pronounce her name, called Elphaba a witch. And so I'm curious to see how part 2 is going to, what's going to happen in part 2. Another curious aspect with how I looked at Wizard of Oz is in the movie, yes, she's called Wicked, the Wicked Witch of the East and the Wicked Witch of the West. But if you were to look at the Wizard of Oz as the story that we know it now, as propaganda that's put out by whoever told that story, you could see Wicked as this is the truth of what really happened, but the powers of Oz put out this other story. That's one way of reframing how you look at Wizard of Oz. Another way of reframing it is when you look at the motivations of the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz, it was because she just wanted her sister's shoes. And again, I haven't seen the theater. I haven't seen, the musical. But if I think it's a fair assumption to make as someone who's never seen the musical that somehow there's going to be some explanation of how the Nessa character becomes the Wicked Witch of the East, because they make reference to her shoes, her silver slippers, which I know in the book were silver, but they were made red in the movie so that they could pop. That with that additional background, when you think about the movie, the Wicked Witch of the West just wanted her sister's shoes back after Dorothy dropped a house on her. I know she didn't do it on purpose, and so that motivation in and of itself is not evil. And I think she has a right to her sister's shoes, and she just wanted her sister's shoes and turned into this whole thing. So, reframes how I look at Wizard of Oz. Anyway, love the movie. Can't wait to see what part 2 is like. And I think that's it. I was trying to think of something clever to say at the end there, but I have nothing else.
But he said wait for after he says goodbye.
That's it. Good day. What? Yeah, that's it. Bye. Oh, wait. I do have one more thing. And we're watching Wizard of Oz and thinking about Glinda. It's kind of messed up that she didn't tell Dorothy at the very beginning. She could have just clicked her heels 3 times and gotten the hell out of there. That's kind of messed up. But knowing his backstory, I could see why she would do something like that. Okay, that was it.
I'm dead. That's so funny.
I'm glad he remembered what he was going to say, because that's really perfect. And I love...
Oh, gosh. Go ahead. Sorry.
I love the framing of it as propaganda put out by Pro-Oz.
Mm-hmm.
The whole film, the 1940s film. That's sweet. That is really sweet.
And what do you think about the discussion of the reframing of Elphaba as, that she's... the word witch is being used as a derogatory term that she claims?
Well, that's so old, it's tired.
Okay.
Any woman who expresses opinion, displays power, talks back, anything, sooner or later the W word is going to come at you. So
okay, yeah.
And in the film, it happens so quick. Like as the audience, you're so with her. And then all of a sudden, like, just all it takes is one. This is what it's all about, right? Like, all it takes is one person in power to shift the tide. And it was just it was an assault, it was just so confronting, so quick. And that's what made it so powerful to me when you realize, like, it only takes, one powerful person to change the whole narrative. All the more so. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
All the more so because Madame Morrible had been the one person who really did value her. But of course, it seemed like she valued her as herself when really she was just valuing her power for the purpose of being able to do these spells. And that's one of the most heartbreaking things of all. When people who are supposed to care for you physically care, but also emotionally care, who have said, spotted you, set you out as being something special, and then boom, 180 degrees, and it's just devastating.
She was being groomed. I mean, she was being groomed to be put in that position, to have that carry that label.
Absolutely.
And it's sad. It's really sad. So.
And I'll be interested to see how Act 2 works that with Glinda.
Right. So, Ron, I can assure you the book of Wicked, which is not a canon to the Frank L. Baum Wizard of Oz stuff. It's its own canon riff on it. But in that book, they do spend some time talking about why Glinda doesn't tell Dorothy about clicking her heels.
Ah.
Maybe
that will show up in part 2 of the film.
Yeah. I'll talk about it in the spoiler part that neither of you is going to listen to, but for anyone who is interested. But okay, so let's get into the different set pieces of the film. So we open at the end, and that's the same way that the Broadway musical ends. Opens is though we do get this better view. That view of Munchkin Land as they come in is amazing. Like those were all real tulip field bulbs that they had very carefully timed to bloom at the same time.
Oh, holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that village in a bowl effect, that was really cool. And we have to talk about Glinda and that classic dress and that bubble.
Yeah, well, they couldn't present her any other way, could they?
Right. Anything you want to shout out about the opening scene, Nichole?
I loved Glinda in the bubble, because in the Wizard of Oz, she's very ethereal, obviously, and floating and majestic. But Ariana Grande had such more humility to her performance, and it was you could tell that she was kind of like an imposter, kind of faking her way through it a little bit. And I loved that there was a vulnerability to her. And, if you know the plot of what you're about to see, you can understand where that's coming from. And I just loved, I was really interested in Glinda masking her feelings. And I don't know, it was just a really lovely observation of the human condition to me. So I read too much into Glinda in the bubble, because she really is in a bubble,
No, she
bubble of her own thoughts and bubble of this brainwashing that may presume she was under. So I really, as usual, overanalyzed that piece, but it was just visually beautiful as well. So
I'm glad they lost the crown.
Okay.
from the 1940s film. And I think that is part of what you're talking about, Nichole, is that this Glinda is not going to put on a crown.
Have you seen that? There's that argument that went viral a number of years ago where the guy's like, she's not a witch, she's a princess.
No, I'm it's part of my life that I didn't give away, so that's fine.
No, you haven't missed anything, but anyone who's curious can look that up. But yeah, in the beginning, in the opening scene, she's singing, she's got this smile pasted, and Ariana Grande does this so well. She has a smile pasted on her face, and she has to sing a song about being glad about someone who maybe people who are seeing it for the first time don't realize in the opening scene that how close they are, how important they are to each other in their life. And she has to be like, ding dong, the witch is dead, smile, smile. But you can see someone says something mean about Elphaba, and her head just kind of twitches that direction. She just does it, and her eyes were watering up, and my eyes were watering up. She had to listen to those mean things.
Yeah. And not only listen to them, she was it felt to me that she couldn't empathize the way that you would want to empathize when you lose a friend. And that seemed like control, she was being controlled by someone or something. So that's what I read into all that. But her performance was beautiful and so nuanced in a way that you don't see from Glinda in The Wizard of Oz, right? You don't see that level of nuance.
Oh gosh, no.
Not at all, right?
No.
Right.
So it was just such a different portrayal of a character that we all kind of know, in a way that put her in 3-dimension. That seemed really intriguing.
That's interesting. I thought that the control was self-control.
Mm.
I
Can be
really
both.
will be interested
Yeah.
to see how, the second part handles
Yeah.
herself. Because she's clearly a different person from who we see in Shiz University. So
Right.
how did she work through all that?
Life,
what
man.
were the levers? What were the
Yeah.
levers that they used on her, kind of thing? I don't know. Maybe I'm
I
ascribing too
love
much
that.
to it.
I love that they make her, she's a good person in the end, but she's an imperfect person. She is a snob,
Mhm.
but
Yes, she is.
but she is also underneath. She has a heart that can be reached, and she feels things, and she wants to be good and do the right thing. And she's not a bad person by any means. She's just imperfect.
Self-absorbed.
Yes, very self-absorbed. Well, one scene that they added that I was super happy about is the flashback to the Throp sister childhood.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we got that scene. Well, there is in the musical the song and dance with showing their mother. Her name's Milena in the book, so they don't really name her in the show. Boo.
She's one more dead mother.
Right.
Classic trope.
Yes.
Classic trope of the fairy stories,
In the books, the first section of the book is mostly from her perspective, more or less. So she's a major character
Interesting.
there. But so obviously they've like drastically simplified her story, and I understand because they don't have time to go into how she is like the second daughter of this and and she ran away with the reverends to kind of piss off her parents in a way, and the
So
ennui she feels, and yeah.
maybe we need another book from McGuire. Elphaba's mother.
Yeah, well, I mean, so she does. She's covered a lot in the first book, especially, and I assume the childhood book of Alfie is obviously going to have a lot about her as well.
Sure.
I miss. So one book difference is that the couple actually. So after this dalliance that we see with the green bottle that results in Alfie's green skin. Later,
I got that. I was very pleased.
Resulted in me having a really awkward conversation with my daughter.
Yeah, you have my sympathies.
That's okay. It's all part of it.
But yeah, you would have had to have a more awkward conversation if they kept to the book, because then eventually the Elfie's parents end up forming a loving throuple with a character named Turtleheart. And Nessa is as a result of that throuple. So we see Nessa.
Okay.
She's slightly pink in the flashback because the quadlings are pink, and Turtleheart was a quadling.
Interesting.
That's cool. I think we would have been okay with. We're ready for it culturally, right?
Okay.
I don't know.
I think probably
it's not in the musical. It's not in the musical.
Okay,
it's not in the movie. Yeah, it's
I
in the
think
book.
they would have lost a lot of family viewers.
That's
the kids.
fair. Okay.
I mean, you talked about it's part of the job. I mean, would you really want to explain a throuple to your daughter?
No. No, I redact my statement.
Yeah, and one other big difference with Nessa Rose in the book is so it's a similar sort of thing where she's taking a drug because she doesn't want another green child, and it ends up with a birth. Nessa has birth defects, but in the books, Nessa has no arms. So I can understand them transposing that to a wheelchair user, which is much easier to cast.
And to act and so forth.
Yes, yeah, and so basically, well, actually, that's an Act 2 thing, so I won't say that. But yeah, the father giving too much milkweed to try to prevent greenness. It leads to Milena, to the mother. I'm gonna call her Milena. That's her name. Dying. And we have Alfie. This is also an addition. Nanny Dulcibert. Who's basically raising Elphaba. So Elphaba does have a nanny who's an important character in the books, but she's human and completely different. But I can see this change.
Interesting.
This is added not in the musical; it's added for the movie, and it's a shortcut to explain why Elphaba is so passionate about animal with a capital A rights later.
See, this is the kind of thing to do an adaptation from one medium to another.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely a perfect example of shortcutting and saying, not having to have long exposition and not cutting out the whole thing altogether. That's brilliant. I had no idea that was the case, but wow.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss, hats off.
Yeah. And that's why I'm glad they could expand a bit in the movie, you know? Yeah. And in the book, it's also, you know, their father's more, he's sweet to Elfie. He's kinder to Elfie in the book. He calls her Fabula. That's his nickname for her. But he's more focused on Nessa for a variety of reasons, including Turtle Hearts, that background, including her extra needs. And, you know,
Sure.
She's his little princess. And you know what you'll find interesting, Marilyn, or probably we all will, is that in the books, the Throp title, Eminent Throp, it's the head of Munchkinland is a matriarchal title. So actually it comes through Milena, through the mother.
They kind of didn't really pick up on that thread, did they?
No.
Too bad.
That.
Just one more dead mother, you know, that's the fairy tale trope. Just leave it at that. Even if she is a matriarchal ruler, oh well.
Any more thoughts about the childhood flashbacks?
I loved them. I thought they really endeared you to the character, and that was the point. And I think the exposition of setting up her allegiance or her affinity to the animals was really important too. It really did give context for things that happened later. So
yeah.
No, it was crucial. Knowing as much about her background as possible. You know, this is the probably one of the underlying questions is how do people turn out the way they do and why?
Well,
right.
Are we born wicked? Right? Or do we become wicked? Answer no.
Yeah.
Spoiler, no. We're not.
Marilyn, what did you think of the water entry to Shiz? To the university?
Very dramatic. Very dramatic.
That was a movie edition. I approve.
So my first question is, where in the world did the name Shiz come from? I have so many connotations with this word that have probably nothing to do with higher education. So that was kind of odd to me. Is there a background of some sort?
I mean, it's just the city that they're in. It's the second largest city in Oz, and it's called Shiz. I honestly never really thought much about it, but I suppose, yeah, I can see where the connotations go. It just seems like in general, he just kind of does, I don't know, it just sounds like an Ozian name, quote unquote. I don't know
this was an invention of McGuire?
I think it might be. I'm not sure. If anyone knows who's listening, whether there is a Shiz in the original books, let us know. Because like I said, it's been years. I've been kind of rereading the original book, but basically that means I've been doing this. I have this app called Sleepy Bookshelf, and
it's amazing. Tell me everything.
So it's just, I mean, it's not even an app actually. It's just a podcast you can listen to on any podcasting app. So they have they do these classic tales, and the woman has a very soothing voice, obviously, and they edit the story so that it's like as non-disruptive as possible, you know, so you nod off. And then the beginning of the next episode recaps the episode that you fell asleep to last time and then continues from there.
Isn't that brilliant?
This is perfect for me. I'm writing it down, adding it to the notes.
So I've been sleepy bookshelfing the original Wizard of Oz recently.
It wouldn't work for me. If anybody's telling me a story, I am absolutely tracking. There's no way I can fall asleep when there's a story going on.
Her voice is so soothing.
I'm
and
sure
she does
it is.
The page sound. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Oh, wow. No, I find need white noise. I use ocean sounds.
Okay, that's fair.
Waves crashing on a beach. Gently, softly.
Yeah.
And not with a pattern or a rhythm, because if it's a loop, I can figure it out. I mean, it's okay if it's a 10-minute loop, but if it's a 5-minute loop, So yeah, Shiz University, very bizarre, but I adored the library.
The library was so cool.
Oh my word! And the fact that they knew of the importance of libraries to any academic institution, to have a library be the central place to present one of the central characters, who would have been the last person you would have thought would have been interested in libraries, given the role that he plays as
Oh, we're going to talk about Fiyero in a moment.
Okay,
I have things to say. He's the biggest change from the books, but we'll talk about it.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah. And I also wondered, I guess it's not an exclusively magic university. because
No.
only one professor of sorcery. So
she's the head of sorcery, so not the per se.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what else are they learning there? Sorry, academic wants to know.
So in the books, actually, Elphaba doesn't study sorcery. She studies natural sciences, as does Bach and their classmate.
Interesting. I hear all kinds of subtexts there.
Mhm.
In any case, they really managed to avoid Potterisms quite well, and I was appreciating on that. The costumes, we started to talk about this earlier. I also really tracked on the costumes because they were uniform, but they weren't uniforms. And the differences that they had, I was wondering if they were implying bigender or asexual or, cross-dresser or, gender variant. I mean, there were presenting male masculine figures wearing skirts that were not kilts, and then there was some with a half skirt. So I don't know what did you folks think about it?
I'll pipe in the book thing real quick and then unleash you. But just to say that, so it does seem like it's a modernization, to be more respective of the range of genders. But also, I have to say, Elphaba in the book, it's left open to the reader's interpretation. But there are several indications she may have been born intersex. But sorry, what were you saying, Nichole?
I was talking about how it did seem that the uniforms were like a non-gender specific, but Galinda was always in pink and no one else was in pink, and I couldn't unsee that.
Yeah.
And I kept overanalyzing it again. Was it made just to offer more visual cues to the audience of where to look? Was it made to kind of establish her pink brand? But I couldn't get over that. Like, everyone else had, yes, all different mismatched blue tonal uniforms, but she never did. And I didn't understand why, and I really wanted to. So if you have any insight to that, having more backstory than me, I'd love to hear it.
I think that's just a production design decision.
I was going to say, even without the backstory, I think it's intended so that all eyes come to her.
Yeah.
Which also reinforces her character and her self-absorption. Of course, all eyes would come to me. Why would I wear a uniform? I wish to stand out. And yeah, she really does.
I wanted it to mean more. I wanted it to mean a lot more.
I think it signifies her personality.
Exactly.
Sure.
It's a great visual shorthand for that. I'm really fascinated by the fact that the book hinted that Elphaba would be intersex. And of course, you said the character of Fiyero is quite different. Well, that also would have to follow on, given the way they develop him in the story. So when we get there, I'll be very interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, I want to ask first, what did you guys think of her friends, Fanny and Chen Chen? Those are also her closest friends in the book, and I thought they nailed it. But
well, it was kind of over the top for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm a big Bowen Yang fan. Yeah, I think he's very funny. And I was great to see him included here. But they were definitely over the top. I think they were meant to be. It was meant to be annoying, and it worked.
Right. But they're sort of the friends that Glinda grows out of, as we see her getting
glad
closer.
to hear it, and I'm not surprised to hear it either.
Yeah. I mean, we see it in this film already as she's getting closer to Elphaba. She's realizing there's more substance in the world.
Right. I mean, as someone who was a target of that kind of, abuse all throughout the teenage, and not so much in college, but definitely, through most of school, it's like, I just don't have time for this.
So the entrance of Elphaba, by the way, and the entrance of her and her sister, and the handing off of the shoes and the interaction with her father, that all being condensed into one scene comes from the musical. And I get it. Like, that whole thing is like, I don't know how many chapters of the book. Because
Wow.
Nessa's Elphaba goes to school first because she's the older child, and then Nessa joins later because she's younger.
Sure.
So they're just kind of putting it all together. But I get it.
But added to that is the fact that the only reason why Elphaba is there was to make sure that she was happily installed. But she wasn't even going to attend in the first place. Did I get that right from the film?
That's how it is in the film and the musical, but that's not how it is in the book. Yeah. Can I ask, Nichole, what did you think of Madame Morrible? Did you you saw the junior thing first, so I guess you had an idea that she might not be all on the up and up.
Yeah, I was suspicious of her from the start, even when I saw the junior version. I mean, the young 8-year-old that played her was remarkable. So she really conveyed the sense of like, there's always an undertone, and I think she was cast really well in the film, and she was acted really well. Yeah, like
Michelle Yeoh, yeah.
So you got the sense that this lady had some secrets. And this lady is also the characters here are all so three-dimensional, and you got that with her especially. Like, I wanted to know what she was like when she was alone, right? Like what was going on when she was like all by herself. Like, where was her head at? But that's just very much my nature to have those kind of questions. But yeah, I didn't trust her.
Yeah, you, Marilyn, I think you felt the same.
Yeah, I didn't trust her from the start. I mean, again, Michelle Yeoh, fabulous actor in so many roles. But she just presented that it wasn't sickly sweet, but it definitely had the sense of there's more going on here. There really is. And she stands out so much in that she singles out Elphaba where everybody else is kind of going, ugh. So I mean that could be another marker that there's something going on here. I was also confused about the ruby slippers because didn't Glinda give them to Elphaba eventually?
I don't know that she gave them to her. She was showing them to her, but those are. We should note that that Nessa got silver slippers from her father.
Right. You've explained that, so that is all a whole lot clearer to me now. So then I guess I'll just call it
I think it was an
homage.
Easter egg. Yeah,
it's an homage to the Wizard of Oz film from the 40s
for sure. Yeah, and she actually clicks them together 3 times during that song. Yeah,
right. I'm wondering if Madame Horrible, who I changed the first letter and she's Madame Horrible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is she going to become one of the witches? Probably not the Wicked Witch of the East, based upon things you've said. So already teensy spoiled, but I'm not worried.
Well, hey, that was actually what Ron said. So.
Oh, that was Ron. Okay, sorry.
And he hasn't seen the musical or anything. So. Yeah. But yeah, I in the book, Madame Horrible's sinister from the jump, and actually Elphaba shows up at school. She's already calling the wizard a dictator. So but I think it's nice they give her this arc where she's like, she has this hope of like, oh, it's someone who might understand me, and and then
well, he's in a green city, so how bad can he be?
Yeah.
I'll blend right in. Ha ha ha.
So they really fleshed out the character of Buck, who's played by Ethan Slater, the Munchkinlander. What did you make of him, Nichole?
I liked him. I thought he was cute. Oh, I know that's a kind of a pejorative term, but he was cute.
He's supposed to be. Yeah,
he's supposed to be. I felt not even empathy for him. I went right onto sympathy. Like, I just felt bad for him. This is telling of me, I think, but it was fun to watch how easily he was manipulated. Fun is a weird word to use there, but that was intriguing to me. I thought of like how he's just a nice subservient man, and I like that. And I thought he was sweet. Just thought he was sweet and well-meaning.
Yeah. He his last name, by the way, he got a last name in the movie. Now it's called Woodsman. So he has a smaller role in the musical. He's a big character in the book, and he does have a massive crush on Glinda in the book. But the whole thing about Nessa having feelings for him is added, the whole love triangle aspect, because in the book, Nessa is just a religious zealot, basically. Like, her father used to be a missionary, and because of her, she hides behind her zealotry, basically, because of her armlessness.
And then becomes a witch?
Well, who knows? We haven't seen the second half.
We haven't seen
I know, but like, okay, cool. Something happens.
But she's not such a zealot in this version of the story. I think they took that part of her character out. But yeah, in the books, it all plays into each other.
In Lorehound world, we have a term for that. It's waffo.
Waffo, yeah. Watch and find out.
Wait and find out.
Yeah.
Just catching on.
So, Marilyn, you were saying about Fiyero that you're not surprised he was the most changed. Why is that?
Well, I mean, if he's getting into a love situation, from what you were saying before, I mean, how does that track, right?
What do you mean?
What did you say before about? Where did I pick that up from? You said he was a different character. I'm trying to back up into our conversation.
Right. Oh no, yeah, I didn't really expand upon it yet. Shall I tell? Okay, I'll tell you guys what the big change is. So he is, again, they say he's a prince of Winky Country, and they call that the Vinkus in the books, although it is pejoratively called Winky Country. And he's actually, there's 3 tribes within the Vinkus, and he's a prince of the Arjiki tribe. And he is regularly described in the book as having dark ochre skin. And he has these blue diamond. It's unclear whether they're tattoos or paint, but it's blue diamond pattern all over himself. So he really stands out when he shows up at school. And that's one reason why he and Elphaba form a bond, because they have this visibly outsider status that they share.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
I just found him really hard to read. I mean, he presents as this, sophisticated, blasé, full of ennui, spoiled prince kind of character who's not going to let himself be touched too deeply by anything. And then he helps Elphaba save the cub. That really came out of left field for me. Yeah. And clearly he has feelings for her, but he still sticks with Glinda. I mean, superficiality, the visual, whatever. So somewhat contradictory to my mind, but waffo, waffo, waffo. I also wonder if that cub that they rescued may turn out to be the future Cowardly Lion. But don't have to say anything. That's just me. I don't know. I'll put some internet points on it. How about that?
Yeah, I'll just say that in that classroom scene in the book, they name the cub Burr because he's shaking.
Yeah, I think I saw that somewhere.
I loved the Fiyero character. I really did, and I know I talked about Jonathan Bailey before, but even above all that, and I liked him for the reasons that you didn't, Marilyn. I liked that he was like
interesting.
Yeah, that it seemed like a facade. It seemed like he was masking and like playing the role of someone superficial because that's someone of his stature, how they should be. So when he started kind of having feelings and and the cub bit, I was like, that's who he really is, but he's not allowed to show it. And that's why he relates so much to Elphaba, because
interesting.
They have parts of themselves that they're masking and they're hiding. Right. So that's what I loved about the Fiyero character, was that, yes, they were charming and it's a very stereotypical Prince Charming vibe, but there was depth that he wasn't allowed to show because he was trying to play the role. And I think that that's like a metaphor for masculinity in general.
Sure.
That was really intriguing to me.
And rich, privileged masculinity.
Right, exactly.
No, I love that reading. I think you're probably right.
Well, and I think that ties into what they actually did with this. So I told you what Fiyero's like in the book, but there's actually also another character who's cut from the musical, and this character is Bach's best friend named Averick. And Averick is from it's from the same area where Shiz is and where Glinda's from. It's the wealthy area, and he is a high status guy, and he is actually a bit superficial. Well, he's actually quite superficial, and he calls out. He's like, "Yeah, people tell me I'm an asshole all the time." Meh. And so they combined, and that's the personality that they have. Fiyero, this version of Fiyero, uses a front. And then his real personality, this more tender person, is behind that. So that is interesting. They layered these 2 book characters over each other to create one character. And I have to bring up that he's not with Glinda in the books. That's Glinda, honestly. I won't say what happens to her later, even though that's completely different, obviously, than the musical. But the only person I really thought she ever might have romantic feelings for was Elphaba. Yeah.
I think you said that before.
But this, I understand why they made this love triangle, because it adds yet another wrinkle to the complexity of their
Well, and classic Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
So
I didn't hate it. I
No,
love seeing
no.
their courtship. It was so
No.
cute.
No, like
and
I said, yeah,
they're beautiful and like funny together. So
it's a great adaptation because it does something completely different. It still touches on a lot of the core themes and messages, but also recombines things in ways that work in a much shorter runtime. Yeah. And we got the spinning library, definitely movie edition. That was such a cool idea on their parts. So inventive.
Unbelievable.
I recommend going. You can find online. There's videos with the production designer talking through like all these things, like and also that the map they walk into in Oz, and
it's cool. The behind the scenes stuff is cool to check out for the library scene specifically. Because Jonathan Bailey will say like, I'm not a singer, I'm not a dancer, like what am I doing here? But he nailed it.
Yeah, you could fool me. But so the last major character we have to talk about in the shiz part of the story is Dr. Dillamond, the goat, played by Peter Dinklage. This is actually, this is kind of the political core of the movie. Totally character from the books, has a much worse storyline in the books. This is much kinder on him than the musical.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And it's about... In the books, there are animals with a lowercase a that don't speak, and animals with an uppercase a that do speak. And he is researching what is the difference between how did the speaking animals happen? Why are they, again, as they show in this movie, why are some losing the ability to speak?
Wow.
And Elphaba is assisting him with this research, and Bach ends up getting involved, and a couple other people who didn't make it into the movie. I loved that they redid the thing where she walked in on the meeting. That's a little different from the musical, and I love what they did there. That she comes across as clandestine meeting. What did you think, Marilyn?
Yeah, I really like the character. I like the way they're using them. I mean, once again, the adaptation for screen compression worked really well for me. Of course, I didn't know what they're compressing, but I think they cover it quite well. Interesting about the whole Glinda thing, and wonderfully used to do this incredible stereotypical white feminist thing. Well, in solidarity, I will change my name. It's like,
because he couldn't pronounce the "g" in her name.
Yeah, but he goes into the explanation. We don't have upper teeth, and so there's
the real like centering of herself in the narrative.
Absolutely,
because she wants Fiyero to see her as the champion of animal rights that Elphaba is after their lion napping caper or lion freeing caper. And so the heart of this is obviously it's the tale of these two friends, the forced roommates. We talked about the loathing song, and then we see Glinda does some real bullying of Elphaba with her friends.
Oh, it's awful. It's just awful.
Yeah.
And then
been in that position before on the receiving end.
What did you think of the ball, the Ozdust ballroom scene?
I didn't love it.
No,
I didn't love it. I understood.
Oh, thank you, Nichole.
I understood what they were trying to do. I understood the point of it, but it just like it felt like that whole thing went in slow motion for me. And the pace of the movie was such a good clip. Like everything, it didn't feel long in any part except for that scene. And I understand why. Like I understand why the choices were made. I think, but it just, and I don't even have a recommendation or a critique. But it didn't land for me. I liked it, but it was too long, too slow. What do you guys think?
Well, I thought it was the pivot point, obviously, for Glinda.
Right.
And important to have. I just couldn't totally believe in her complete change of heart.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, yes, what Elphaba did in this version is incredibly bold and brave. And, basically, F you people, I am who I am, and I dance my own dance. And so for Glinda to pick up on that showed a level of emotional empathy that I didn't really ever see in her before. And, it would have been very easy for her to go along with the crowd and say, oh, for crying out loud, just get out of here. And risking losing her cred, with all of her chorus and her heroes, her worshipers and everything. It's interesting. But immediately after we get the song popular, and I thought, okay, now we're back to a more realistic form of development. She's like, oh, I'm so impressed with you. I'm going to take you over now and make you into my own image. So I can do this. I've done this before. This is my thing. So yeah, clearly she's still, she isn't completely changed in her understanding of human relationships and people as individuals. But it was very dramatic. It was emotionally dramatic. I will say that for it.
Yeah.
And wonderfully done. But I don't know. Of course, I haven't been in a ballroom. And, I've never been in a ballroom. I haven't been to a student dance. Well, maybe I never did go to one. Anyway.
So the ballroom scene, that's definitely something from the musical, not from the books. And this is a thing where you have, like in the book, there's so much more space for these two women to progress toward friendship. And there is, there's not a ballroom that they go to in town, but they are regularly, they're in this university town and the students are meeting at a coffee shop or, going to the bar, or there's something called the philosophy club that's part of the adult entertainment.
Oh dear. If those philosophers, you gotta watch out for them.
They are wild though. Like, the philosophy department's out of their mind. I say out of their minds. That's weird, but
if you talk to someone who was disturbed by the book, they're probably going to say the philosophy club was what did it for them.
Wow.
Okay.
But yeah, so the setting was, but it was also, it felt like high school, like a high school dance. But that's from the musical. It did remind me of Wednesday, although that Wednesday TV show came out after the musical, so it must have taken.
Interesting.
The dance idea.
I have seen that one clip. I haven't seen the whole show, but I have seen that one clip. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. No wonder the vibes were familiar to me.
Yeah.
Because I did see that.
And also, this is not how she got. There was a thing about Glinda was going to. She was mad at Fanny and Shen Shen, so she went back to her room and she's like, well, let's do something silly with Elphaba so I have a story to make fun of her later. And she's trying hats on her, and she actually puts on this purple floral hat, and she's like, wow, that actually looks gorgeous. More like what we see later with the pink flower. And that's sort of a turning point for her, where she starts to see Elphaba more as a person and realize that maybe this conversation they have, she's like, oh, maybe she has more substance. It's not a dance number, but a musical, musical.
Yep, musical.
But we also see Fiyero, he's eyeing Elphaba during this dance moment. So this is also a pivot moment for him too, I think.
He values courage.
Yeah. But I think one reason why she did it, you were saying that you weren't sure why the quick turn. I think it comes down to Madame Morrible showing up there, because it's a chain of events where she told Bach to ask Nessa to go to this ball.
Right.
And then Nessa told her, like, oh, Glinda's being so nice. And she's like, oh, maybe I misjudged Glinda. And so she goes to Madame Morrible and says, I want Glinda to be, it really means something to her to be, in this sorceress workshop with us. So, yeah, and she shows up at the ball, gives her the wand and tells her that. And that is definitely on her mind as she's watching, like, oh, this person who just did the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me is now being humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then what'd you think about were you excited when I was almost worried. Like I was like, doesn't she go to Oz with Elphaba when the train's pulling out? And they really save it to the last minute. I'm like, doesn't she go with her? Where's she?
That was very dramatic. And
yeah.
I enjoyed it.
And then I thought, like, she's going without luggage.
Well, just one day. Just one day in Oz.
It's just one day.
Yeah. One short day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a book difference too, because well, here's a political thing. In the book Shiz, the city, they have railroads to other parts of that part of the country, but they intentionally do not have a railroad to the Emerald City because they don't want they're trying to limit the influence of the wizard. And so it takes them, when they travel, they take that trip together, it takes them like a week to get there, and they're like sleeping rough or, you know, sharing a bed in an inn, and that's really a bonding moment.
Well, not in the movie. They just zip right there on that green train, and next thing you know, you're in a dance sequence.
Even in a 2.5 hour movie, you know.
You zip from one dance sequence to another.
We are moving along. We got to get people out in time for lunch.
Right.
Like, let's go.
Yeah, so let's talk about that dance sequence. We already brought up, we have to call out that the originals, Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, show up to do that. The propaganda.
I caught Kristen Chenoweth. I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense.
It was so good that I cheered out loud that the people I was with were like, "You're embarrassing us." Like, stop cheering. I was so excited. I just didn't expect it. I was so transported in this world that I kind of not forgot about them, but when I saw them, it was just it just made me do a double take in the best way. And then I went home and deep dived and listened to commentary from the director and the screenwriters that they knew they wanted to put those two in as a cameo somewhere, but in a way that wasn't just superficial. They wanted it to be meaningful, but not extract you from the story too much.
Right.
And I think that they did it in such a mindful way that just provided exposition and really got us where we needed to go as an audience to have the information to move forward. And it was just a fun break from some heavier commentary.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They're so good.
I will pat myself on the back here and say the minute I saw the first monkey guard, I said, aha, future flying monkey, along with the rest of the cohort here. Okay. But the flip is, of course, that it resulted from her saying the spell, and it was painful, and they didn't want it. And so, I mean, again, presumably part of the book, and I'll be interested to see how that gets turned around in part 2, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Completely different in the book.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because so Chistery is the name of the main monkey, and Chistery is introduced in this whole other plot, this whole huge section of the book just didn't make it into the musical because they simplified by having this tying this origin story to the wizard and to Emerald City. Yeah. And I have to say that Emerald City it looks like the Emerald City from the Wizard of Oz movie, whereas
yes,
in the books when Glinda and Elphaba show up, they're like, oh, it's not even as clean as shiz,
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's
interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love it because it's this facade, right? This propaganda.
Sure.
And I'm just
really that whole opening song was musical propaganda, claiming the wizard can read the book he can't read. But
yeah, and also a callback to again to the 1940s film.
Yeah,
it was all sparkly, and I was sorry they didn't have a horse of a different color.
Yeah,
that would have been a bit too much.
Maybe Act 2.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see Dorothy go there or something. Although I guess that's because the story is really from Elphaba's perspective mostly. So
right.
What did you think about? She got that personalized summons with the whole show in front of the entire college. Do you think that was about wanting her power for the book, or what do you think that's about?
Yeah, I think it was, and I think it was a way to get her there for her to feel special. I mean, she was just kind of love bombed, right? It's kind of just cult indoctrination. Let's get her here. No one can do this but you. We need you more than anybody. You're so special and different. And she's always been told that being different was bad, but now here's someone in power saying that being different is good. And that can feel really good to someone that's been marginalized their whole life, right?
So it sure can. It also makes me think of, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
For sure. But when you're
of course she's gonna take it.
She's a college freshman. They have nothing but hopes and dreams filling their buckets. So
pretty much.
Yeah.
This is the time they all get ripped away.
Right.
Are either of you a Jeff Goldblum fan?
I am.
Yeah.
I recognized him and I couldn't think where, how, or what. But
Okay.
he seems a very similar character to whatever this other thing was. Which
Well,
may come to me.
like Jurassic Park is a big
he was.
one.
It was in a Marvel. It was in a Marvel series.
He's the collector. Yeah.
He's the collector.
No, sorry, is that Benicio del Toro? No, he is the
Junk Planet.
Yeah,
where Thor eventually meets up with Valkyrie
from Thor Ragnarok. Oh,
yeah,
see, I was gonna say Scar, but because that's the kid, but it's Sakaar. That's why. Yeah, Scar is his son. Sakaar is the planet, anyway, and he's the Grandmaster. And by the way, the Grandmaster is the brother of the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro.
Well, hence the confusion.
Yeah,
I think this role was really on brand for Jeff Goldblum. I think he was well cast.
Right.
Even though he can't really sing that well, but that's part of it because he's an imposter, right? And he's like trying to be something he's not. And
nice.
But just like this kind of quirky, eccentric, lovable character that you can tell has secrets. Right. That's how I've always felt to Jeff Goldblum. And he was just, it was hard for me not to see him as Jeff Goldblum though. And to see him as
exactly. He is that kind of actor. No, I think, Jeff Goldblum can't sing. Well, neither could Rex Harrison. And he created a whole new interpretation of the role as a result, right? So, it's not always a bad
thing. Yeah, so, and we get this evolution also from Elphaba, where at first she just like wants to be de-greenified because she's tired of being the object of scorn because of it. And then, when she realizes that what she really cares about is she wants Professor Dillman back. She wants animal rights. And then Morrible shows up. And then, things are going to get horrible.
Dun, dun, dun.
I love everything about the production design and the props in the show. I loved that model on the wall they crawled into. And I really loved the design of the grimory, the way it's like this diamond shape that folds up onto itself.
Super. Absolutely super.
Really cool. The model was really cool. And when they changed all the colors of the road, like, I think yellow works. I was like, oh, so cute,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like really lovely.
And the sound of the spell was very effective. It did not sound like any other abracadabra sort of thing I'd ever heard before. It was not based in Latin, thank you. So it still had that sense of, yes, this is a coherent language, and I can't understand it, which gives you more of the mystique of, oh, this is something powerful happening.
Yeah. And I also loved the animation of the book too, where you see, because they do talk about the book shows up differently because it's again part of that whole other part that was cut out where she found chistery and stuff in the Finkus. But they talk about when someone tries to read the book, it's like the words are swimming over each other. So they represented that really well. And then when she's casting the spell, it's like there's wings pulling out of the page. It was just so cool. So
it was beautiful.
Absolutely stunning.
No. Were you surprised, Marilyn, when the wizard took a heel turn?
No, I was just waiting for when it's going to happen. No.
Yeah.
No, they were true to the original book. They were true to the film. Yeah, it was going to happen. Scary. And anytime anybody smiles that much and oh yeah, everything's wonderful, it's like, okay, smile politely and look for the nearest exit.
Yeah.
Which they did.
Eventually. Well, I mean, but they really put Glinda in the middle. Were you worried, Nichole, that she might not follow Elphaba?
No. Was I worried? I don't know. Worried's strong. I'm worried about going to the grocery store. So I'm worried about almost everything. But like I knew she would follow her, but I knew she would follow her to try to convince her to stay. Because I had heard the song before. Yeah. Right? So like I knew like the narrative of the song, and I was like, how are we gonna get there from where we are? So that was what I was watching for, like just getting to the high note, right? At that point. Right. It was scary. Like it was scarier and darker than I expected them to go after seeing like a sugary sweet first half of the movie in some regard, right? Especially with the Glinda character. I liked seeing some grit from her and some resilience from her. Yes. And I want more of that. And then when I came home and rewatched The Wizard of Oz, I was like, oh, this Glinda's awful, right? Well, just because it was so sugary and sweet. So I was interested in that, in the dynamic there. But I knew she'd follow her. I just didn't know to what end or what would happen next, I guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the 40s film Glinda in this context, because I'm suddenly wondering if one of the reasons why they decided to make her so pink and sparkly with a crown and a magic wand, they were moving away from the image of witch. Again, thinking of the early reactions to the book, where some people said, we don't want a witch to be good. That is impossible.
Yeah.
And so perhaps, there's plenty of fundamentalism around in the 1940s. And maybe that's why she wound up the way she did. Much more like a fairy godmother, of course.
Right.
Than a witch. And I've never liked pink. I'm sorry. I'm just,
I have no
my
beef with
older
pink.
sister was always dressed in blue, and I was always dressed in pink, and I didn't like it anyway, and that just made it worse.
Yeah, I can imagine. I like how they kind of subvert expectations with the thwarted balloon escape attempt. Like you're like, oh, they're getting out, no.
Right,
Yeah.
which is part of the callbacks to Wizard of Oz, which was nice.
Right, with the balloon, yeah. Yeah, and then we get, the flying gravity. They stretch it out for 15 minutes, as we said, but I mean, as it should be. And the goodbyes, like, am I the only one who sobbed?
My husband sobbed.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. He didn't sob. I think that song is just really emotional. I think it's very meaningful as a woman. Like the lyrics of that song are very powerful to me and have been for a long time. And that's all I can say about it now. Otherwise, Mark's going to get really mad at me when we talk about it in more depth. But I think that there is something about that, I'm going to be me, and if you don't like it, that's okay. That I find really powerful and brings a tear to my eye because I just love empowerment generally.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was watching more visually than I was listening to lyrics, and there were no subtitles, so I'm sure I missed a lot of words. I'll have to go back and look up the lyrics or something. But they really treated it well. You can tell that Elphaba does not want to leave Glinda.
Yeah.
Even as she knows she has to. But she doesn't put on this armor of, okay, fine.
Yeah.
It's there. It's clear. It hurts.
Yeah.
And I think it also hurts for Glinda to say, no, please don't do this. There has to be a different way. The whole working from within the system or working outside the system.
Right.
And can you come together in some fashion? And golly, how many dear friends are having similar conversations, at least in the United States and probably elsewhere in the world, all the time.
What do you have any thoughts on what might happen with Glinda next? Because now Elphaba, she can fly off with her newly enchanted broom, but Glinda is stuck with the wizard and Madame Morrible and the winged monkeys, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I really hope that there is a sense of Glinda is going to be Elphaba's inside agent, maybe. Although I don't know how they maintain contact. There may be a backlash against Glinda from her friends to say, "We told you so." Why did you ever? I mean, yes, poor thing, you had to room with her.
Right.
But
because Morrible goes immediately over, I don't know, Oz wide, or at least I guess to the school. She tells everyone that Elphaba is the Wicked Witch, and the students of Shiz evacuate because they don't know where she's going.
Yeah, and that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, all right, so maybe the castle isn't defensible, but hey, castle usually implies defense, and if it isn't, it should be. But yeah, the whole panic-inducing thing so that you can then come forward and say, a la Sauron, figure out what the greatest fear is and then tell them how they can overcome it.
Yeah.
Right.
I am your savior. We will protect you from this evil, which is not evil. And I really wonder where Fiyero is going. And I guess since they've changed his character somewhat, maybe it's not as clear
I mean,
anybody
I
else?
know from the musical, but
for the musical, of course.
Yeah.
Duh.
But yeah,
Duh.
we see him fleeing the school grounds on horseback on his own. So is he going to see what happened to Glinda? Is he going to Emerald City? Is he going home to Winky Country to the west, or what is he doing?
Where's he going to go out and try to find Elphaba?
Yeah, but where is she going?
Yeah, well, she didn't even know herself yet, right?
She said she's
Yeah.
to the western sky. She's going to the western sky.
There you go.
Right,
There you
right,
go.
Care to find me? Look to the
Go
western sky.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go. I'm leaving an address.
We know where
such as
she
it
ends
is.
up in terms of direction. So
Yeah, so that's
Hello.
one thing. It's right there in
Wicked
the
Witch of the
song.
West.
Yeah, like right.
Wicked Witch of the West. Duh.
Oh, what happens to Glinda?
No.
I think Glinda. I mean, I think that she's just going to be a pawn in the political machine. That's what I think. But that's
Well, she certainly is that at the end beginning scene that we saw.
Yeah.
She's
got potential towards that, right?
And this announcement, it seems to give Governor Throp, the Elphaba and Nessa Rose's father, it seems to give him a heart attack. And so Nessa Rose watches this from their home in Munchkinland as he gets the news about Elphaba going rogue. Any thoughts on what might happen next there?
Big question mark.
Yeah.
I mean, he may survive the heart attack. How does Nessa Rose feel about being abandoned by her sister, who she has always, up to this point, loved and cared for? That could produce a real emotional whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
She may team up with Glinda.
Yeah. To be continued.
Yeah. What do you Lorehounds say? If keep watching or something.
Waffo,
what was it?
Waffo.
Yeah,
it comes from the Wheel of Time fandom. Yeah.
Watch and
do
find
that.
out.
Yeah. I'm just gonna have
or
to do
wait
that.
and find out. Sometimes it's read and find out. So I consider
then that's
W to
Raffo.
just mean wait.
Yeah.
right. Raffo. I like that one.
That was the original, actually. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Any other thoughts or scenes you want to call out?
I just think it's another cool thing, if you let me talk about Jonathan Bailey for one more second, is that
please.
Okay. That the horse that he rode in on, you know, this is an actor that worked on Bridgerton, and it's the same horse that he used on Bridgerton.
That's cool.
He needed a horse for this movie, and he's like, I know just the horse, and it's like the same horse. And I just think that that's kind of lovely.
They're adorable photos. Yeah.
They're adorable. And especially when you think, I don't know, I'm overthinking it, but the whole thing about animal rights and animal activism and animals having a voice, like this horse like, has a voice, right? And I think that there's like
and there's voices.
Something there.
Jonathan Bailey. Yeah.
That's not overthinking. That's amazing. That's a lore cut. So
there's
you're absolutely in the right place here. Yeah, I didn't know until I looked it up. I kept watching this guy and saying, I know who this is. Where have I seen him? And of course, it was Bridgerton. So
yeah,
right.
I was glad when I got that cleared up.
He made an impression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait for more, but I'm gonna have to. So
yeah,
but not that long. Only a year.
Only a year.
Should I read all the books? Should I read all the books between now and then?
I mean, I don't know if that will help or hurt your enjoyment, but I mean, it is just it's a different animal from the books, but and especially in the back half, it diverges wildly. So. But you are holding space for Defying Gravity. So tell us a bit about Never Mind the Music and what's going on over there.
Well, Mark has a master plan to really break down Defying Gravity. So our pod, Never Mind the Music, talks about like intersectional themes of music and psychology. My co-host Mark is he's a music guy. He would hate that I said that. But he knows so much about music and like the elements of how music is composed. And he's really gets hyper focused on stuff. So he's been really digging around all this Defying Gravity canon and trying to kind of find threads about, you know, maybe to determine what is the best version of this song and what is it. And I love, which we're going to, but he hasn't told me, like he likes to not tell me. So maybe that's not even what he plans to talk about. We'll have to wait and see. I love the idea of the lyrics behind Defying Gravity and this idea of holding space for them and kind of honoring this idea that as women, we can be strong and vulnerable all at the same time, and maybe find our vulnerability is our strength, right? And
absolutely.
And female connection, when they're saying goodbye at the end, they love each other, and whether that's a romantic love or not,
right,
that's secondary. Like the fact that you can love someone and still feel fundamentally different from them in a number of ways, I think is a really powerful idea, especially right now. So I'm really eager to dig into those themes when we talk about Defying Gravity as a song. We're going to put it out when Wicked comes onto streaming services.
Great.
I can't wait to share it. Yeah, check it out, please. It's been a really great time working on that podcast. And it's been really fun to hop into some of these one-shots with you guys, too. So I really appreciate you. Thanks for letting me join the club here.
It's delightful having you, and I appreciate all your additions, including listening to you now just made me realize, okay, this is a film that absolutely passes the Bechdel test.
Oh, yeah.
And it could have gone in so many other directions, with the triangle and all that other stuff. So really glad it didn't.
Yeah, it toes the line of both, like, mining the political nature of the original story and the complexities of this friendship, but also adding the more commercial elements that just make it go down with a spoonful of sugar. Yeah.
Unless it's one of those dolls, with the website on the back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we didn't mention that they accidentally put a porn website instead of the movie website. But to be fair, I mean, good on that porn website for getting wicked.com.
It seems fairly obvious, but
the resale value of those misprinted boxes are out of control right now. But that's a story for a different day.
I think I worry about the copywriter who is in charge of that. I was like, I hope they didn't. We're so underpaid these days. I hope they didn't take the brunt of that.
Oh, buddy.
So Marilyn, we've wrapped up the second season of Rings of Power. Are you and Sarah planning a second season of Rings and Rituals?
Absolutely, unquestionably. We didn't actually start the first season until like over a year, I think, after it had finished showing, and I think that was good because it gave a lot of things like distance and time to marinate and so on and so on. I think both of us could be ready to do it really soon, but on the other hand, our schedules are mad. They're just absolutely mad. So I'm holding off on my colleague, Dr. Sarah Brown, has been presenting at all kinds of conferences. She was the Tolkien Society's Oxenmoot keynote speaker. So she's got a lot going on in her life. And I just want to make sure that it is not, one thing that puts us both over the edge kind of thing.
Right.
But so don't really have any specific plans right now as to exactly when, but yes, it will definitely happen.
Okay.
Is the best I can say for now. So watch the space.
Well, thank you both for joining me today on this Friday the 13th, we should say, which is one of my favorites. I love Friday the 13th. It's a lucky day.
Maybe that's why, I had that little technical snafu. Mercury is also retrograde, by the way. So there you go. There you go.
Well, so I'm going to let you go, but listeners, stick around till after the break if you are curious to hear some of the things that came up in the first movie that give us hints about what's going to happen in the second movie. And then, just talking a bit more about what's going on in the network. So be right back with you after a quick break, but saying goodbye to Marilyn and Nichole. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi, and welcome back. Quick upfront note, it's almost New Year's Eve in Amsterdam as I'm recording this part of the episode, so don't mind any bangs you hear in the background. My city is not under attack. Its citizens just really love to take advantage of the looser personal fireworks rules for this holiday. So, Just to run quickly through a few more spoilery elements that come from, the second half of the musical, and a little tiny bit from the second half of the book that I couldn't talk about with Nichole and Marilyn. So again, if you don't want to hear this part, skip forward a little bit. I will put timestamps in the show notes so you can see exactly where to skip to if you just want to hear the outro. But okay, here we go. So I'm speaking slowly so people can leave. Okay. I was really interested to hear that nobody said anything about the man who came by to sing and dance with Milena with a green bottle with Elphaba's mother at the beginning of the show, that he maybe sounded a little bit like Jeff Goldblum. And also, I just want to point out for those in the know that they did a really good job toward the end, once Elphaba met the wizard, of him just really leaning into wanting to be a father, in general, wink, wink, wanting to be a father, but the way he looks at Elphaba. And that explains so much also of the favoritism that he shows her, and his interest in her is that he, unlike the books where he only finds out after she's gone, he does know that he is her father, and he is interested in, that sort of relationship as well. In the book, and this is definitely different in the musical and thus also the movie, it seems, in the book, the Grimoire, that magical book, the reason that Elphaba can read it is because she, as his daughter, she's half from our world. And in the books, the Grimoire comes from our world. And so he can read it in the books. But in the show, they just kind of simplify it and say that, it's really about your level of magic. So this shows that he's a fraud. He's not a magician, really. He's not a wizard. We did already kind of mostly talk through this, but just to clarify, yes, Nessa is the Wicked Witch of the East. Like the Wizard of Oz 1939 movie, there is no Wicked Witch of the North in this version. And West is Winky Country. So this is where Elphaba and Fiyero come together again. I really hope that we will get maybe, like the way they expanded some elements of this movie and showed us more of her childhood. I hope maybe we'll get some more nods to the Finkus part of the story from the book in the second half as well. That would be really cool. And they could do some really cool visual things with that as well. As Marilyn guessed, Burr, the lion cub, it does indeed grow up to be the Cowardly Lion. But some other major shortcuts, huge changes from the book, is that we have already met the Scarecrow and Tin Man as well. In the books, the Tin Man is a sort of random person that Nessa later curses because she's basically requested to punish him for cheating on someone. But in the show, the Tin Man, it's Bach. Nessa turns Bach into the Tin Man, basically, and we'll see that in the second half. And the Scarecrow, that is Fiyero. And in the book, Fiyero dies. He is killed, basically, for his association with Elphaba. And at some point, as Dorothy and her entourage are approaching her castle, which is Fiyero's old castle, she is thinking to herself, we don't know who is under that hood of the Scarecrow. Could it be Fiyero? But that's just really wishful thinking on her part. She realizes it's just a man of straw. A straw man, so to speak. Ha ha ha, get it. But so the show, they really did make that character Fiyero, which I think it's kind of lovely. Like I said earlier, a lot of the characters get much kinder endings in the show versus the books. And indeed, there's a happy ending overall, unlike the book. So we notice that in the book, there's a huge deal made about the fact that Elphaba's really allergic to water. She avoids it her entire life. She bathes in oils. And in the show, what I noticed, which was curious, in the movie, rather, what I noticed, which I found very curious, is that at one point it starts raining and Madame Morrible does put an umbrella up over her, but she is not at all shying away from the splash of the rain. So I think the implication is that this version of Elphaba is actually not allergic to water. And that would explain how she, spoiler, survives at the end. But we'll see that all play out. And I hope yeah, I hope they give us a nice, satisfying romantic ending that we don't get in the book, but we do get in the show. But I hope that they lean into that even more. As far as the question of why Nessa doesn't tell Dorothy about the shoes, the book's explanation, which maybe they'll go into a little bit in the show, is basically she's just trying to stall Dorothy. She's trying to, she's killed Nessa and dropped a house on her, even though it was by accident. And so Glinda's like, well, what do I do with this girl? She's like, well, let's send her off to the wizard. And as she's going on this whole journey to the wizard, it buys me time to kind of try to figure out how to handle the situation. And not that she ever really does. It just leads to her and Elphaba fighting more. Elphaba's still around and has some more talks with her father and stuff at this time. And this is the quote that I read from Bach and Elphaba earlier, comes from this moment. So basically that's why she doesn't tell her, because she's trying to stall her. About the question of Glinda being controlled, though, that is a very interesting one, because what does control mean? Is it direct? Is it indirect? Does Glinda, we see her sort of a vapid version of her former, already kind of vapid self by the end of the book, but there's that sadness like that we see in the opening scene where she's smiling, but there's tears in her eyes. And I do wonder if they're going to give us more overt information about what her relationship is with the wizard and Madame Morrible, with Glinda gone, now that they have more space to do that. So cannot wait for the second part. And by the way, anyone skipping spoilers, you're now safe to come back. And this episode is dropping on December 31st, as is, by the way, the Nevermind the Music Defying Gravity episode that you heard Nichole talking about earlier. So you can find that episode in the Nevermind the Music feed, and I will paste a link in the show notes here as well. And the reason why both of these episodes are releasing today, of all days, is because today is the day that they've also released Wicked for home viewing. So it's now on digital video on demand. So you can watch it at your home if you like. So I definitely recommend doing that, or rewatching it if you like. Also, do check out all of the other things we've recently published in the Lorehounds feed. David and I just wrapped up the Dune Prophecy. We're also going to have 2 extra wrap-up episodes with feedback and another crossover with the new Dune Minute podcast. John and I just did a Doctor Who episode about the Christmas special. And there's also a series of Netflix Christmas specials but 1 in the public feed and 2 for Supercast and Patreon subscribers. And do check out our Pachinko Part 3. We just finally wrapped up the Pachinko. You can listen to Part 1, by the way, without having watched Season 2. Jean and I did a Comics Versus episode about Joker Folie 2 and Joker versus Madcap. And tomorrow, New Year's Day, Agatha Coven Quiz coming your way with best wishes for a Happy New Year. And now, as I said, there is an extra Supercast and Patreon with additional episodes and other bonuses, and you can find all the information for that in the link tree in the show notes. But if you're not interested in subscribing, we're just really glad that you listened. And if you got something out of this episode, please do share it with anyone else you think might be interested. And we would really love if you could leave a positive review wherever you're listening. There have been a few nasty reviews that have popped up recently. So if you feel differently, if you do enjoy our coverage, then your kind words on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen would go a long way. Also, of course, I have to shout out my other podcast, Wool Shift Dust, which is currently in the midst of weekly silo coverage. And also, we just wrapped up a special mini-series of A Christmas Carol for the holidays. Radioactive Ramblers is covering the Red Rising series. They just finished Arcane. They're doing Ghibli coverage. Properly Howard is doing a few good film series. And do check out the Severance feed to prep for the new season starting in January. And join the Discord to talk about all these things and whatever else you're playing, listening to, reading, watching, whatever. You'll find a link tree in the show notes with links to all of these podcasts, to the Supercast and Patreon, to everything else I'm talking about, and the Discord, of course. But as always, I want to end with a special shout out to our Discord server boosters, and most especially to our lore masters, our highest tier of subscribers. Thank you, Discord server boosters Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Athena Ajalea, Tina, Liz Stu, Nancy M, Ghost of Partition, Radioactive Richard, and thank you most especially to our lore masters, Samartian, Michael G, Nichelle E, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elysia U, Neil F, Ben B, Scott F, Stephen N, and always last, Adrian. Thank you all, and go and listen to Nevermind the Music. See you again soon.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.